Before you close your eyes tonight, take a slow breath. Let the world outside fade, the noise, the light, the weight of today dot, because in this story, the world itself is fading to dot. We are traveling to the last dawn of Asgard, the day when even gods learn how to fall asleep forever. Now let's begin. The morning was pale and silent. No birds sang above the golden halls, and no laughter came from the feasting rooms. The sky was washed in a faint silver mist, soft enough to look peaceful, heavy enough to feel final. Odin stood by the tall window of the Loskelf, watching the light move across the floor like water. The stillness was unnatural, a silence that seemed to listen back. He had known this quiet once before, long ago, before the first war, before men learned to pray. But this was different. This was not the calm of victory. It was the calm of endings. He lifted his hand, touching the cold edge of his throne. The gold had lost its warmth. Even the stones beneath his boots felt lighter, as though Asgard itself was letting go. Behind him, Frigg entered without a word. She moved like someone who had already accepted what was coming. "You can feel it too," she said. Odin nodded. "The air has changed. The song of the world is slowing." They stood side by side, watching the horizon. Far away, the faintest glow of red flickered above the sea, soft, rhythmic, like a heartbeat pulsing in the distance. Frigg's voice trembled. "Is that the fire of Muspelheim?" Odin didn't answer immediately. His one good eye reflected the glow. "It is the breath of the giants," he said at last. "The sky will burn before the day is over." The words hung between them, heavy as stone. He turned from the window and walked through the hall, his steps echoing softly across the marble. The walls were covered in paintings of the past, wars, victories, earths of gods, moments that had once seemed immortal. Now they looked fragile, like stories fading in an old dream. At the end of the corridor, the great doors to the courtyard opened. Thor was already there, his hammer glowing faintly in the dim light. His arms were bare, his face calm, but his eyes carried the weight of centuries. "Father," he said, "the ground has begun to move. Heimdall says the bridge trembles even in silence." Odin stepped into the courtyard. The air smelled of frost and iron. "Then we stand ready," he said. Thor hesitated. "Ready for what?" Odin's gaze lifted toward the clouds. For what was always promised. The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of cracking ice. Somewhere beneath the 9 realms, Yggdrasil's roots strained. The world tree groaned, and the earth beneath their feet gave a soft, warning sigh. The first tremor came then, light, almost gentle, as if the world were taking a breath. Dust fell from the eaves of the golden halls, and far away, the waters of the great rivers began to ripple. Odin closed his eye and whispered to the wind, "The serpent turns in its sleep." And indeed, deep within the oceans, Jormungandr stirred. The water darkened, the waves rose, and the horizon trembled. The sea no longer obeyed the sky. Frigg gripped Odin's arm. "What will happen to them? To the mortals below?" Odin did not look at her. "They will dream, and they will wake in another dawn. We do not have that gift." From the walls above, the ravens came, Hugin and Munin, circling low before perching beside him. Their feathers were damp with mist, their eyes restless. Munin's voice was soft. "Smoke rises from the sea." Hugin added, "The wolf walks free." Odin's hand tightened around his staff. "Then it has begun." He looked across Asgard. Warriors of Valhalla stood in formation along the steps, their armor glinting faintly under the dimming sun. They were silent, not out of fear, but reverence. Each knew what day this was. The day no god could escape. Odin spoke quietly. They should eat, drink, laugh one last time. The end should not be met with hunger. Thor smiled faintly. You always did prefer ceremony. Odin turned to him, his expression soft. No, my son, I prefer peace. This is the only peace we have left. The sky flickered again. This time, the red was brighter, closer. A distant boom followed, slow, low, rolling across the plains like thunder buried in the earth. The sun dimmed. The clouds turned the color of iron. Heimdall stood upon what remained of the rainbow bridge. His eyes glowed faintly, scanning the horizon where light and shadow met. His hand hovered near the horn at his side, but he did not raise it. Not yet. Odin joined him. You see it? Heimdall nodded once. Fire in the east, ice in the north. Both are moving. The two halves of the world, Odin said, coming home. They stood there, gods of order watching chaos arrive. Beneath them, the plains began to crack. The rivers hissed with steam. The air itself shimmered, bending light in strange waves. From far below, a sound rose, low, steady, like a drum beating within the bones of the world. The Allfather turned, looking back at his shining city. For a brief moment, Asgard looked as it always had, golden, proud, radiant beneath the sky. Then a gust of wind passed, and with it came the smell of smoke. Frigg appeared once more, her voice quiet. You could still run. He smiled faintly. And leave the song unfinished? He looked toward Heimdall and nodded. The guardian of the gods lifted the Jallarhorn to his lips. The sound that followed was not a call to war. It was a farewell. A deep, endless tone rolled through the heavens, carrying across all realms, a sound that reached the giants in their mountains, the dead in their cold halls, the serpent beneath the waves, and the wolf waiting among the ruins. The end had begun, and as the echo faded, Odin closed his eye. So this is how silence sounds, he whispered. The wind blew gently through the halls of Asgard, scattering petals from the white trees. The world, for one final breath, stood perfectly still. The horn's echo drifted across the 9 realms, like a wave that would never end. It reached the farthest mountains, where frost slept upon stone. It passed through Midgard, rippling through mortal dreams. It sank deep into the dark waters of the sea, where Jormungandr stirred for the first time in ages. And in the shadows of the world, the giants lifted their heads. The sound had no beginning and no end. It simply existed, like truth or destiny. When it faded, Asgard was no longer silent. The ground shook with a low rumble, steady and endless. Birds took flight from the golden roofs, their cries sharp against the still air. The rivers of the city began to tremble, spilling over their edges as if the world itself had forgotten its shape. Odin stood at the edge of the courtyard, his cloak sweeping through the rising dust. So it begins, he said quietly. From the east came the first light, not of dawn, but of fire. The horizon glowed with a deep red pulse, spreading slowly, consuming the gray sky like ink. The air grew warmer. Sparks drifted through the wind, carried from a place far beyond sight. Muspelheim, whispered Frigg behind him. The fire giant walks. Surtur, Odin replied, the keeper of flame. In the distance, a shadow moved, vast, slow, and glowing from within. Its edges blurred with heat, its steps heavy as mountains falling. With each motion, the world groaned. The seas hissed, the sky warped, and the air burned. Yet the gods did not retreat. They stood beneath the trembling heavens, still and solemn, like figures carved from light. Thor approached Odin, his armor already glowing with lightning. If this is the end, he said, then I would see it with open eyes. Odin placed a hand on his shoulder. Then stand tall, my son. The storm comes for all. A sudden gust tore through the city, scattering gold dust and flower petals through the air. The wind smelled of smoke, salt, and something older, the scent of beginnings turning into endings. Below, on the plains of Vigrid, the earth began to split. Great cracks opened, spilling molten light. From the gaps rose shadows that took shape as the giants marched forward, their eyes glowing like dying stars, their footsteps shaking the ground. Heimdall stood upon the broken bridge, horn still in hand, watching them approach. His voice carried across the wind. They crossed the plains. Thor raised his hammer. Then so will we. Odin turned to the warriors of Valhalla. Thousands of gleaming eyes stared back, souls that had died in countless battles, reborn for this one final stand. They did not shout. They did not sing. They simply waited. Go, Odin said softly. Let courage be your farewell. The gates of Asgard opened. The sound was deep and hollow, echoing through the burning air. The warriors moved forward, slow, deliberate, unafraid. Each step they took left light behind, like footprints made of fire. Thunder cracked. The sky tore apart. From the west came a wave that rose higher than any mountain. Its surface shimmered like glass, reflecting the chaos below. The serpent had awakened. Jormungandr lifted his colossal head from the sea, scales gleaming with poison. The world tree shook as he uncoiled his endless body, wrapping around the earth, squeezing until the land itself cried out. The sea climbed higher. Whole forests disappeared beneath the waves. The mortals of Midgard ran toward the hills, praying to gods who could no longer hear them in Asgard. Odin felt the pull of it all, the thread of every life, every soul, vibrating together. This was not chaos. It was completion. He turned to Frigg. Do you see now? She nodded, tears in her eyes. The pattern was always here. A tremor rippled through the ground. Fenrir's roar rolled across the plains, a sound so vast it seemed to come from the sky itself. The wolf had broken free. His breath was fire and ice, his eyes two burning suns. He ran through the field, his shadow devouring the light. Odin's heart sank, not with fear, but with recognition. He remembers, he whispered. Every promise, every lie. The gods began their descent from the shining walls, their weapons drawn, but their faces calm. They walked through the smoke and into the red horizon, like stars fading into dawn. Thor raised his hammer to the clouds, and lightning answered him, not in anger, but in sorrow. Each bolt struck the ground like the beat of a drum, echoing the rhythm of the world's final heartbeat. Heimdall stood beside him, horns still glowing in his grasp. We will not see another sunrise. Thor smiled faintly. Then this one will have to last. Above them, Yggdrasil shuddered. Its leaves, once endless, began to fall, glowing fragments of gold drifting through the smoke. They fell across Asgard, across Midgard, across the sea. Each leaf that touched the ground burned briefly, then turned to light. Odin raised his gaze to the tree's crown, where the realms once met. The colors were fading, their bridges dissolving into mist. He had ruled for ages, sought wisdom beyond measure, sacrificed his own eye to see all that could be seen, and now, at the end, he finally understood. No wisdom could stop what must complete itself. A deep sound filled the air, not thunder, not wind, but the groan of the world folding in on itself. The mountains leaned. The rivers turned red. The stars fell from the sky like rain. Odin looked to Thor. When I fall, he said, do not weep. The world will need your strength one last time. Thor's eyes met his. And when you wake, may it be in peace. The fire giant Surtur lifted his sword above the horizon, its blade glowing brighter than the sun. For a moment, all was light, pure, endless, blinding. Then came the heat, washing over the realms, burning air, earth, and sea alike. Odin stood still in the storm, the flames reflected in his single eye, and for the first time in eternity, he smiled. "This," he whispered, "is the sound of the world exhaling." The light consumed everything, the halls, the gods, the sky. The sound of battle faded into the roar of the wind dot, and then, once more, there was silence. But it was not the silence of death, that it was the silence of renewal. The breath before something new begins to dream. The storm did not end. It simply changed its voice. The sky, once burning gold, had turned the color of ash. Fire no longer roared, it whispered. The wind carried the scent of smoke and salt, of endings made quiet. Through the veil of flame and mist, Odin walked alone. His armor was dimmed, his cloak torn by the heat, but his steps were steady. Around him, the world that he had built was folding into itself. Halls melting, rivers boiling, stars falling from the heavens like tears. Yet there was no fear in him. He had seen this moment in his visions, countless times. Now that it was here, it felt less like destruction and more like truth revealing itself not far in the distance. Across the broken plains of Vigrid, a shadow moved, vast and slow. It rose higher than mountains, its breath shaking the air. Fenrir, the wolf's fur shimmered between frost and fire. His eyes burned with the light of twin suns, not in rage, but in awareness. He had felt the pull of destiny his entire life. Now, finally, the chain was gone, and he was free to walk the final path written for him. Odin stopped when the ground beneath him trembled. He looked up. A sky opened, and through the drifting smoke, he saw the wolf's gaze fall upon him. For a moment, there was no sound. No flame, no thunder, no war, only the slow rhythm of the world's last heartbeat. They looked at one another, God and beast, creator and consequence. The wind moved between them, cold and hollow. Fenrir spoke first, his voice deep as the ocean's floor. "You feared me once." Odin's face was calm. "I still do." "Then why do you not run?" "Because this was never your hunger," Odin said softly. "It was mine." The wolf lowered his head, eyes narrowing. "You forged the chains. You fed me trust, then bound me in betrayal." Odin nodded once. "To stop a storm, I tried to capture the wind." A low rumble passed through the ground. Not growl, not anger, only acknowledgement. Fenrir stepped forward, his paws sinking into the molten earth. Each step left a glowing print behind, like wounds upon the world. "Did you ever believe you could change the end?" "I believed I could delay it," Odin answered. The wolf tilted his massive head. "And did that make you wiser?" "It made me old." Above them, the world tree trembled, its branches glowing faintly as they burned. Embers drifted down like stars. One landed on Odin's shoulder, and he did not brush it away. Fenrir watched him. "You understand now, don't you? I was never your enemy." "No," Odin said quietly. "You were my reflection, my shadow given shape." The wolf's breath came slow and steady, clouds of frost mixing with fire. "Then why fight?" "Because to live is to struggle," Odin said. "Even gods are not spared that truth." For a long time, neither moved. The sky shifted above them, fire dissolving into mist. The horizon glowed faintly with the light of Surtur's sword, a sun that devoured itself. Odin raised his spear, Gungnir. Its tip flickered like a dying flame. "It is time." Fenrir lowered his head, his voice soft. "So it is." When they met, it was not with rage, but with gravity. Odin charged forward, the ground cracking beneath his feet. Fenrir moved to meet him, his jaws wide, the light within them blinding. The spear struck, driving deep into the wolf's chest, and in the same instant, Fenrir's jaws closed around Odin. The world held its breath. There was no scream, no roar, no thunder, only stillness. The light from Gungnir spread outward, golden and pure, wrapping the two figures in a halo that outshone the fire around them. For that moment, there was no war, no prophecy, no time. There was only balance, two forces completing one another, each giving meaning to the other's existence. Then, slowly, the light began to fade. Fenrir stood motionless. The spear still pierced his chest, but he did not fall. Beneath him, Odin's body was still, his cloak wrapped in ash. The god who had seen everything had closed his remaining eye. The wolf lowered his head, pressing his muzzle gently to the ground beside him. "You feared the end," he whispered. But this was never the end. It was only the turn of the page. Around them, the sounds of battle dwindled. Thor's hammer crashed one final time, its echo swallowed by the wind. Heimdall's horn lay broken upon the ground, its light fading. Frigg's voice carried faintly through the mist, a single note of mourning that melted into silence. The fire giant Surtur lifted his sword once more, the heat shimmering through the air. The flames swept across the plains, burning away what little remained. The world tree groaned one last time, its branches falling, its leaves turning to light. Fenrir stood amid it all, the ashes, the silence, the fading glow of creation. He could feel his strength waning. The wound in his chest burned like a star collapsing. He took one last breath, filling his lungs with the scent of smoke and frost. The air was heavy with endings, yet in that weight, he felt something beautiful. Stillness. He turned his gaze upward. The sky, now pale and soft, was no longer a battlefield. The flames had dimmed. The stars were gone, but the emptiness they left behind was peaceful. He whispered into the quiet, "You did not die in vain." Then, slowly, the wolf lay down beside Odin. The earth beneath him cooled. The fires withdrew. The wind passed once, softly, carrying away the last sound of breath. For the first time since creation began, Asgard slept out, and in that sleep, something new began to stir, faint, distant, but alive. The sound of the world breaking did not stop. It only changed shape. The thunder that once cracked across the sky became a hum beneath the earth, low and endless. The flames that had devoured the plains dimmed, not because they had died, but because there was nothing left to burn. The battlefield of Vigrid stretched out like an ocean of smoke. The light that once belonged to Asgard's sun now flickered faintly behind walls of ash. Everything that had color, the blue of the rivers, the green of the trees, the gold of the towers, was now a single endless gray. Thor stood at the edge of what remained of the bridge. Lightning crawled faintly across his hammer, a reflection of the power he once commanded. But now even the storm obeyed silence. He looked down at his hands, scarred, burned, trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from exhaustion. Each breath he took felt heavy, thick with smoke and memory around him. The warriors of Valhalla had fallen. Their armor still glowed faintly, runes pulsing with dim blue light. They were not gone, not yet, only asleep in the dust, their spirits hovering between what was and what would never be again. Heimdall approached, his steps slow, his golden eyes dimmed. The horn he once carried now lay broken at his side. "He has fallen," he said softly. Thor didn't ask who. He already knew the wind passed through the ruins, carrying with it a faint whisper, the echo of a name. Odin. Thor closed his eyes. For the first time, he felt the weight of all his battles settle upon him. Every strike he had made, every roar he had unleashed, every life he had taken in his father's name, they all seemed small now, fragile, like sparks that vanish before they touch the ground. He looked toward the horizon. The fire giant Surtur stood in the distance, his sword raised high, his flame no longer wild, but steady, like a candle in the hand of a priest. He did not attack. He simply waited, his burning eyes locked upon the dying world. He doesn't fight anymore, Heimdall whispered. No, Thor said. He's fulfilling what he was born to do. Above them, the sky cracked. Shards of light fell like glass, breaking upon the plains. Through the rift, the stars could be seen, faint, fading, as though even the heavens were being unstitched. The world tree, Yggdrasil, loomed far away, its vast form shrouded in smoke. Its roots bled light into the soil, glowing veins stretching through the earth like the last breath of a god. Thor stepped forward. Each movement felt heavier than the last. The hammer in his hand hummed faintly, recognizing the presence of its master one final time. He turned to Heimdall. When the sky falls, sound the horn again. Heimdall gave a tired smile. It's broken, and let my strike be its echo. The guardian nodded once. Then go. Thor took a deep breath. The air was hot and sharp, burning his lungs. Yet within it there was peace, the strange peace that comes when there is nothing left to lose. He looked upward. Lightning flickered faintly through the clouds, answering him like a memory. Old friend, he murmured, one last storm. He lifted the hammer, and the sky split open. A single bolt struck down from the heavens, brighter than fire, louder than thunder. It struck Thor, and in that instant, his body became light. He launched himself across the field, his hammer spinning, the storm wrapping around him like a cloak. Fenrir's massive shadow moved across the distance, his steps shaking the ground. But this was not rage now. It was inevitability. He and Thor collided, fire and lightning intertwining, the world bending beneath the force of their meeting. The sound was not a roar, but a deep, steady pulse, the rhythm of a universe collapsing. For a moment, time stopped. The lightning froze in the air, the fire curved in slow motion. And in that silence, Thor struck the wolf's side, burying the hammer deep into the creature's ribs. Fenrir stumbled, his body arching in pain. His roar cracked the sky, shattering the remaining clouds. But as the light faded, Thor did not rise again. His form lay still, the hammer beside him, its glow fading to a dim ember dot. The storm died with him. Heimdall watched from the ruins, his expression calm. He's gone, he said to the wind. A faint sound came in reply, a whisper that could have been thunder, or maybe just memory. From the north, the ice began to move. The frost giants were falling back into their slumber, their bodies dissolving into mist. The seas calmed, the fires cooled, and across the plains, a deep quiet began to spread, heavy, final, sacred. Heimdall turned to face the horizon. The bridge beneath his feet groaned. It would not hold much longer. He lifted what was left of his horn, the cracked instrument that had once called gods to war. With what strength he had, he raised it to his lips. No sound came, only the echo of what had been. He smiled faintly. Then this will have to do. He looked toward the heavens one last time. The gate is open. Let the silence come. And with that, the bridge collapsed beneath him, disappearing into the sea of light below. The wind passed over the field, sweeping through what was left of Asgard. The world tree creaked softly, its last leaves falling like glowing tears. One landed on Thor's chest, and for a brief second, his hammer flickered again, just once, before fading completely. Far above, the last star dimmed. Far below, the last river stilled, and in between, the ashes of gods began to settle. The world had not ended with an explosion, nor with a scream. It ended with a sigh, quiet, long, and strangely human. Then there was nothing but peace. The storm had ended. The wind no longer screamed, the fire no longer roared. What remained was silence, not the empty kind, but one filled with invisible sound. The faint hum of things that had not yet realized they were gone. Ash drifted across the plains like snow, covering armor, bones, and broken steel. The world had stopped moving, and in its stillness, it began to breathe again. Heimdall's bridge had fallen into the sea. The fragments of its rainbow light still glimmered faintly beneath the waves, shimmering like a last memory of joy. The air smelled of salt, ash, and iron, the perfume of endings. From where Odin's body had fallen, the earth had grown smooth. No crater, no mark of violence, only stillness, as though the world itself had tried to heal the wound. The Allfather's cloak was half buried beneath the ash, its once brilliant blue now pale and gray. One of his ravens perched beside it, feathers singed, eyes dim. Huginn. The other, Munin, lay still nearby. The surviving bird tilted its head, as if listening to something far away. It let out a faint cry, not of fear, not even grief, but confusion. The sound echoed softly through the ruins. Across the field, the air shimmered. Ghostly figures moved within the mist, faint shapes of warriors, their spirits still clutching their swords, not yet realizing they no longer had bodies. They drifted between the remnants of Asgard's walls. Like reflections in rippling water. There were no cries, no laments, only the soft whisper of motion. The world had become a place between breaths. Far to the south, the fires of Muspelheim dimmed to a dull glow. Surtur stood still, his flame now a memory, his blade buried in the blackened ground. The light of his eyes faded slowly, until even he, the destroyer, looked peaceful. The sea lay flat as glass. Beneath its surface, Jormungandr's body stretched endlessly, coiled around the world like a ring of shadow. The waves gently touched his scales, as if trying to wake him. Above it all, Yggdrasil groaned. Its massive form was still visible through the mist, but its branches no longer reached the heavens. They drooped like tired arms, leaves falling one by one. Each leaf that touched the ground turned into dust, and yet, with every fall, a faint spark of light escaped, drifting upward before disappearing. Something deep inside the tree pulsed, slow and steady, like a heart still beating after death. For a long time, there was nothing but that rhythm. Then, faintly, from somewhere unseen, came a sound. It was the crack of wood, small, fragile, alive. Then another, beneath the soil, where the roots of the world touched the core of creation. Something was stirring. The ashes shifted. The air grew warmer. The silence began to hum with potential. Huginn spread his wings, weak but determined. He lifted off the ground, circling slowly over the ruins. From above, the field no longer looked dead. It shimmered faintly, as if the light beneath the ash was trying to find a way out. He flew higher. The air was thick with smoke, but above it lay a clear sky, pale, quiet, endless. The stars had not vanished completely. Some still flickered faintly, stubborn and cold. And in that fragile light, Huginn saw something move below. It was not a god, nor a warrior. It was smaller, two human shapes, walking slowly through the haze. They moved with caution, their steps soft, hands clasped together. The woman's hair was long and tangled with ash, the man's eyes wide with wonder. They looked upon the ruins not with fear, but with a quiet sadness. Lif and Lifthracer, the last children of men. They had survived, sheltered deep beneath Yggdrasil's roots, hidden from fire and frost alike. And now they walked through a world without gods. The raven circled above them, cawing softly. The sound startled them at first, but then the woman smiled faintly. "A sign," she whispered. They stopped beside the place where Thor had fallen. His hammer lay half buried, the handle scorched, the head cracked. The man knelt beside it, brushing away the ash. The metal was cold, yet a faint pulse of energy lingered inside. He looked at the woman. "What should we do with it?" "Leave it," she said softly. "The world will know what to do." They continued walking, leaving footprints in the soft dust. The ground began to change beneath them, no longer sharp, no longer hot. The soil darkened. Moist, fertile dot, the woman knelt again, pressing her hand into it. When she lifted her palm, it glowed faintly. "It's still alive," she whispered. From the distance came a faint, gentle sound. Water. A spring bubbling up through the cracked ground, trickling down into a new stream. It caught the faint light from above, turning it into gold. They followed it. The stream led them toward the shadow of Yggdrasil. The great tree still stood, black and broken, but at its base, small green shoots had begun to grow. They were thin, trembling, but alive. The woman smiled through tears. "It's starting again." They sat there for a long time, their hands intertwined, listening to the sound of the running water dot above them. The raven landed on a fallen branch. It tilted its head, watching them. The man looked up. "What happens now?" The woman took a deep breath. "We live." And in that moment, the air shifted. The wind that moved through the branches carried warmth again. The mist began to fade, replaced by a faint blue hue on the horizon, the color of morning. The world had fallen asleep, but dreams were returning. The light grew slowly, almost shyly. It touched the broken stones, the fallen weapons, the ashes of the gods, and wherever it touched, green returned. The air was filled with the scent of rain and soil. The rivers began to flow again. The song of life, forgotten for so long, hummed softly through the ruins. And somewhere, in the heart of what was once Asgard, a single flower bloomed. The air no longer carried the weight of smoke. It was soft again, thin, cool, gentle. The sky, once blackened with fire, had faded to a quiet gray blue. The wind had passed over the plains, no longer carried ash, but the scent of wet soil and fresh water dot. It was the first dawn since the end of everything. Lif and Lifthracer awoke beside the roots of Yggdrasil. The world tree still loomed above them, dark and wounded, but its lower branches had begun to shimmer with faint color. Drops of dew hung from the tips of its leaves, glowing softly like tiny stars caught in daylight. For the first time, there was birdsong. One note at first, hesitant, fragile, then another, answering it. The sound spread, echoing through the ruins of what had been Asgard, until the air was full of music. The silence that had ruled since the gods fell finally broke, and the world exhaled. The two humans sat together, their faces lit by the faint sunrise. The light that crept across the horizon was not the same as before. It was softer, more golden, as if the sun itself had been reborn. Lif whispered, "It feels lighter." Lifthracer nodded, as if the world has forgotten how to be heavy. They looked around. The ground that had been gray was now threaded with green. Tiny blades of grass pushed through the ash, trembling in the breeze. Water flowed nearby, not the raging rivers of the old world, but quiet streams, winding through stone and soil dot, and somewhere far beyond, the mountains that had crumbled began to show their peaks again, faint and blue against the horizon. The tree above them made a sound, not a creak, not a groan, but something like a sigh. A warm wind flowed through its broken branches, scattering leaves that glowed with pale light. Wherever they landed, the earth stirred. Roots spread. Life followed. Lif stood, brushing dust from her hands. "We should move," she said. "Where?" asked Lifthracer. "Where the light goes." They began to walk. Each step took them across the remnants of the old world, over cracked marble, across rivers of cooled stone, past fragments of the gods' works half buried in soil. There was beauty in the ruin. The gold that once lined the halls of Asgard now lay scattered across the ground, dull and quiet, as though content to rest. They found Thor's hammer again, lying where they had left it. This time, it was warm to the touch. Not hot, warm, like sunlight. Lif ran her fingers along the handle and smiled faintly. "It's not gone," she said. "It's sleeping." They left it there, a monument of silence. The day passed slowly. The sun rose higher, spreading its light across a world that had forgotten what light looked like. Clouds drifted lazily, their edges bright with gold. The air shimmered faintly, not from heat, but from life itself returning to balance. By midday, the streams had joined into a river. Fish swam beneath the clear surface, their scales flashing like small sparks of silver. Lifthracer knelt to drink, and when the water touched his lips, he felt warmth spread through his chest, a pulse steady and calm, the rhythm of something ancient and kind. He looked to Lif. "This feels familiar." She smiled. Maybe the gods left their breath behind. As they walked, the world continued to change. The ruins of Valhalla were now covered in moss. What had once been golden walls were soft hills, dotted with white flowers that swayed gently in the wind. The broken statues of warriors were now home to birds' nests, tiny lives built upon the remnants of greatness. The world no longer spoke in thunder. It whispered. By evening, the air had turned cool again. The light stretched long shadows across the ground, and the wind carried the sound of running water and distant leaves. The two humans stopped at the edge of a wide field. It was vast, a sea of grass glowing faintly under the dim sun. In the middle stood a single tree, young and perfect, its bark pale gold, its leaves green and full. Lifthracer stared at it. "Is that?" Lif nodded. "A child of the old tree." They approached. The ground beneath their feet felt warm. When they reached the tree, they touched its trunk. The bark was smooth, humming faintly beneath their palms, alive. Lif closed her eyes. "It's growing fast. Maybe it knows the world needs it." A small wind passed, shaking the leaves. It sounded almost like laughter. The humans sat beneath it, resting their backs against the trunk. Above them, the sky deepened into shades of violet and blue. Stars began to appear, new stars, brighter, cleaner than the ones before. "Do you think they're watching us?" Lif asked. "The gods?" She nodded. Lifthracer looked up. "Maybe, but I think they're tired now." He smiled faintly. "It's our turn to dream." The night fell quietly. The stars did not twinkle. They glowed steadily, warm and calm. The new tree's branches swayed slowly, its leaves reflecting the starlight like tiny mirrors. For a long time, the two sat without speaking. The air was cool, the grass soft, the world peaceful. Sleep began to take them, not as an escape, but as an embrace. As their eyes closed, the faint hum of the earth deepened, the sound of Yggdrasil's roots growing again. Somewhere beneath them, life spread outward, filling the cracks of the world. With light, the gods were gone. But the story was not over. It had only turned a page, and in that soft darkness, the world dreamed anew. Night returned, but it was no longer the night of fear. It was a night that felt alive, vast and gentle, filled with quiet light. The sky stretched endlessly above Lif and Lifthracer, deep blue at the edges, silver where the stars gathered in clusters. They woke to the whisper of wind through the grass. A young tree above them swayed softly, its branches humming as though the stars themselves were singing through it. Dew shimmered on the leaves, glowing faintly like forgotten memories. For the first time since the dawn of the new world, the humans felt something other than survival, wonder. They stood, brushing the sleep from their eyes, and looked across the open plains. The horizon glowed faintly with color, blues melting into green, then into the soft gold of morning. It was not the fierce light of the old sun, but something warmer, more forgiving. The river they had followed had grown wider overnight. Its surface reflected the entire sky, calm and unbroken. Small fish darted near the surface, their movements gentle ripples across the mirrored world. Lif smiled. Everything moved slower now. Maybe it's learning, Lifthracer said. They walked beside the water for a long time, their footsteps soft in the grass. The ground was rich and damp, alive with the scent of renewal. From time to time, they passed the remnants of the old world, half-buried stones, shattered shields, melted metal turned into strange shapes by heat and time. None of it looked like ruin anymore. It looked like part of the landscape, woven back into the world. At the edge of the river, a small hill rose. On top of it stood a single jagged piece of metal, the tip of Odin's spear, blackened and bent. Lif stopped, staring. "What is it?" she asked. "The old stories," Lifthracer whispered. "They said this belonged to the one who could see all things." They approached slowly. The metal no longer glowed, yet when they came close, the air around it shimmered faintly. Lif knelt, brushing her hand over the grass. It was warm. "He's still here," she said quietly. "Not as before," Lifthracer replied, "but as memory." The wind rose, stirring the grass around them. For a brief moment, they thought they heard something, a deep, distant voice, low and slow, speaking not to them, but through them. Wisdom never dies. It changes shape. The air grew still again. They continued walking, neither speaking for a while. The river turned into a lake, smooth as glass, reflecting clouds that moved lazily across the new sky. Overhead, a flock of white birds passed, creatures reborn from the smoke of the old age. Their wings glimmered faintly, as if dipped in starlight. The two humans watched them go until they disappeared into the horizon. When the wind returned, it carried faint music. It wasn't from the birds or the water. It came from the north, soft, echoing, ancient. They followed the sound. The land changed as they walked. The grass grew taller, the air colder. The sky deepened in color, glowing faintly with ribbons of blue and green. Lif stopped and looked up. "What is that?" "The sky is moving," Lifthracer said. Above them, the northern lights shimmered, wide arcs of color stretching from one end of the horizon to the other. They rippled like curtains of silk, glowing in patterns that shifted slowly, rhythmically, as though following a hidden song. The humans stood in silence. The air around them seemed charged with meaning. "They're watching," Lif whispered. He nodded. "Not with eyes, with memory." The aurora grew brighter, dancing across the heavens. For a moment, shapes seemed to form within it. A hammer, a spear, a crown, a pair of ravens spreading their wings. The lights twisted, merging, dissolving into one another, until they were only color again. Lifthracer placed his hand over his heart. "They left their stories behind," he said. "That's what this is. The sky remembering. The lights reflected in the water below, two worlds mirroring one another. One in heaven, one on earth." Lif sat down, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Maybe this is what they wanted. For the world to dream of them, not worship them. The air was cold now, but not unfriendly. The stars above seemed to pulse gently, keeping time with the rhythm of the earth. The sound of the wind was low, almost like breathing. They stayed there through the night, wrapped in quiet. When dawn came, the aurora faded slowly, melting into pale morning light. The land around them glowed faintly gold. As they rose, Lif noticed something new. Near the water's edge, a small patch of flowers had bloomed, white with golden centers. She knelt to touch one. The petals felt warm, even in the chill air. "It's strange," she said softly. "They smell like honey." He smiled. Freya. She looked up. What? The goddess of love, he said. My grandmother used to tell me stories. Maybe this is her memory. Lif smiled faintly, her hand brushing the petals. Then she still lives. They continued their journey. The land unfolded before them, wide and full of possibility. Forests began to appear again, small at first, then taller, richer, greener. The rivers joined into great currents, winding through the earth like veins of silver dot, and as the world rebuilt itself, so did they dot. They spoke less, listened more. They learned to sleep without fear, to eat from the ground, to move with the rhythm of day and night. The gods were gone, but their presence lingered, not as rulers, not as voices, but as balance. Each dawn came quietly. Each night fell gently. The world had learned to breathe again. And somewhere, far above, in the soft light of the stars, the old gods dreamed, not as beings, but as memory, carried forever in the wind. The night had passed without fear. The stars faded slowly, melting into the pale light of morning. For the first time since the end of the world, the sun rose again, not the old sun that burned with the fire of gods in war, but a gentler one, reborn from silence. Its light spread slowly across the land, touching the edges of rivers, hills, and the sleeping earth. Wherever it touched, warmth followed. The air shimmered faintly, carrying the scent of dew and soil, the perfume of a new beginning. Lif and Lifthracer stood beneath the young tree that had grown where the old one had fallen. Its trunk was no longer thin. It had thickened during the night, roots stretching deep into the ground. The leaves glowed faintly gold in the morning light, trembling as if they were breathing. They looked at each other, smiling without words. The river beside them glittered. Small ripples spread from the center, where fish rose to meet the surface. Birds called from the branches. The world was no longer haunted by echoes of battle. It was quiet, alive, and whole. Lif knelt beside the water, cupping her hands to drink. The reflection that looked back at her was different. Her face was calmer, her eyes clear. There was no shadow of fear left in them. She turned to Lifthracer, who stood watching the sunrise. It feels like the first day, she said. He nodded. Maybe it is. They began to walk as the light rose higher. The field stretched endlessly, shimmering with soft color, blues, greens, and faint golds blending together like water and air. The mountains in the distance were crowned with mist, their peaks pale and silver. Everywhere they looked, the world seemed to remember what it once was, but without the weight. There were no temples, no walls, no thrones. Only the rhythm of wind and water in the quiet. They heard faint sounds, not voices, but vibrations in the air. When the breeze passed through the grass, it carried tones that reminded them of songs they had never learned, but somehow knew. Lif stopped, eyes closed. Do you hear it? Yes, Lifthracer said. It's like the world is speaking again. They stood there for a long time, listening. The sound was soft, deep, slow, the pulse of Yggdrasil's new heart, the rhythm of life returning far above. The sky shimmered faintly. The northern lights were gone, but their memory lingered as faint color in the air. From time to time, the light seemed to shape itself into something familiar, a flash of wings, a spark of a hammer, a glint of a spear, but only for a moment, like a dream passing through wakefulness. The gods were gone, but their essence had not vanished. It had spread into the wind, the soil, the water, the heartbeat of every living thing. Lifthracer turned to Lif. Do you think they can see us? She smiled. I think we are them now. They continued walking until they reached the edge of a wide valley. There, the land dipped gently, forming a cradle of green. At the center lay a small lake, its surface perfectly still. The reflection of the sky on its surface looked almost too real, as if another world existed just below. Lif knelt beside it. "It's so quiet." He joined her. "It's listening." The two humans sat beside the water in silence. Their reflections rippled, merging with the sky, blending until they were no longer separate from the world around them. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. The warmth of the day spread over their skin, slow and soothing. They lay back on the grass, eyes half closed, watching clouds drift lazily above. "This is what the gods must have wanted," Lif said softly. "For everything to end so that something gentler could begin." He nodded. They gave the world back to itself. A breeze passed over them, rushing through the grass with a sound like distant laughter. Somewhere in the distance, a herd of animals moved across the plain, not beasts of war, but gentle creatures with calm eyes and slow steps. Life was returning, cautious but certain. When the afternoon came, the air grew warm and golden. Insects hummed. The young tree's shadow stretched long across the earth, reaching toward the river. The land was alive again, yet quiet, the kind of quiet that feels sacred. Lif sat up, looking at the horizon. "Do you think there will be others like us?" Lifthracer smiled faintly. "There will be, when the time is right. How will they know what came before?" He looked at the river, at the way it curved gently through the valley. "The world remembers," he said. "The wind, the water, the stones, they all carry stories, even if no one speaks them." She nodded slowly. "Then maybe that's enough." The light softened as the sun began to lower. The colors of evening returned, pale orange, deep blue, faint violet. The sky reflected perfectly in the lake, making the world look doubled. For a moment, it was hard to tell which was above and which was below. The humans lay side by side, eyes heavy with calm doubt above them. The young tree swayed, its leaves whispering softly, not in words, but in rhythm. The same rhythm that once guided gods and men alike. The rhythm that had no beginning and no end. The wind carried the faintest trace of voices, like dreams floating through the air. Thor's laughter in the thunder's echo, Freya's warmth in the golden glow of the sky, Odin's wisdom in the rustle of the leaves. They were not gone. They had only changed form. Lif's eyes began to close. Her breathing slowed. Beside her, Lifthracer's hand found hers. The air around them was warm, heavy with peace. The last light of the sun touched their faces, and for an instant, the world looked as if it were made entirely of gold. The young tree above them glowed softly, its branches stretching a little higher, its roots sinking a little deeper. Beneath the soil, the pulse of the world continued, slow, steady, endless. And as night returned, the stars shone brighter than ever. Before got no wars. Number gods, no fear, only life. And somewhere, deep in the heart of creation, the world whispered to itself, as if remembering, everything ends so that everything may begin again. The wind sighed one last time, carrying the breath of the gods into the quiet sky. And the new world slept.